The first impact would be probably to increase the US dollar versus all the Western currencies.
So Patrice, taking a look at global central banks, have they been effective in different regions, and which regions have been more effective than others?
Of course, this is the US where the Fed actions were more active and effective in restoring and reviving the growth, and of course it has a great impact in financial markets. But also during the financial crisis within the Eurozone, we have seen that the ECB action was particularly important to restore confidence of the markets and also a bit to revive the activity, and with a less impact, in fact, to begin to revive the credit. We will see next time, we will see for Japan, it's a great challenge because the action in the past years of the BOJ was not so successful.
You're right, and now you mentioned the Fed at the beginning of your answer there. So what is your predictions for the Fed strategy in the coming months? What are you expecting to happen?
Yes, it's a very interesting challenge for the Fed because at this point of time the domestic demand is okay, the labor market is great, and we have seen that the risks coming from the Brexit and the risks coming from China and Eurozone have significantly decreased. So I do think that at a certain point of time the Fed will be obliged to raise interest rates. But what we know now is the equilibrium rate for the Fed is no more 2% as it was prior to the financial crisis, but it's probably closer to 1%. So just a modest rise in interest rates at the end of this year.
And it will definitely be refreshing for markets to see a rise in interest rates as opposed to the opposite direction. So will you be expecting other central banks to follow suit from the Fed's movements?
I think that we will continue to have this difference between the Fed strategy and the strategy coming from all other central banks, including emerging central banks. So I do expect that other central banks will continue their easing, that is, say, for instance, for the ECB to extend the majority of its program of purchases, and for the Bank of England, for instance, to continue to decrease probably its interest rates and to increase its purchases. A bit more challenging for the BOJ, as I said at the beginning, that is to say they will be obliged to improve their strategy, that is to say to have a better mix of decreasing interest rates and purchasing ETFs or purchasing bonds on the market in order to be more efficient.
And how are you expecting the currencies and stocks to react to these central bank movements? We've seen the pound, it's been the worst performing currency of this year following the Brexit. So what are you expecting to happen there?
Globally speaking, it's fair to say that in fact the central bank action, decreasing interest rates and purchasing more bonds, generally depreciate the currency. So we do expect that the British pound to have downside risk to the current level, and of course to the euro, which is quite expensive at this point of time, to decrease further. Of course, for the yen, we have seen the impact of the appreciation of the Japanese yen on the economy. It's a major problem. So the first impact would be probably to increase the US dollar versus all the Western currencies, and of course to continue to have very low interest rates coming from the bond market, but probably also higher volatility at the same time, because this bond market will be more and more dependent of the communication coming from the central banks. For the equity market, the situation will be positive because all these actions constitute, in fact, a sort of safety net for the equity market. That is to say, and you accept, in fact, higher valuations, even if the EPS growth remains globally modest.
Well, Patrice, as always, it was a pleasure to have you here in our studio, so thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's all from us here in the Geneva studios, but for all the latest updates and exclusive market moves, do keep clicking back to Dukascopy TV.